The Heritage of the Bhikkhu, Section Arts, Crafts, and Literature. Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, who was the curator of the Oriental section in the Boston Museum and a scholar of international repute, says, beginning of long quote, Buddhism became indeed the chief patron rather than the opponent of fine arts, which spread with it from India to Ceylon, Burma, Siam, and Java in the south, and to China and Japan in the north. It thus came to pass that it was important for even the priests to have some knowledge of the theoretical side of craftsmanship at least, and this was very often the case. They were rather expected to explain such works as Sariputta to the less learned craftsmen than to learn from him. End of quote. The books of the discipline Vinaya reveal that from the time of the Buddha, bhikkhus painted and encouraged others to paint. The Kulavagga and its commentary state that it is not proper for a bhikkhu to paint figures of men, women, and animals, or cause others to paint them. It does not befit a bhikkhu to ask a man to make the figure of even a doorkeeper, guard. Nevertheless, it is fitting and becoming for a bhikkhu to encourage others to paint such subjects as birth stories, jatakas, of the Buddha, which promote delight and devotion in the people. A bhikkhu himself may paint or ask another to paint the flower and creeper motifs. Accordingly, Buddhist monks were eager either to paint or to have the shrine rooms of temples painted with birth stories and other events connected with the life of the Buddha, which were exemplary and inspiring. They also built images or had them built. Further, it is a general tendency of the people to be attracted more to those temples decorated with beautiful carvings, paintings, and images. The bhikkhus therefore took a particular interest in building beautiful and artistic viharas and dagavas. Thus the arts and crafts were encouraged and developed in Buddhist countries. From the 5th century AC onwards, the contribution made by bhikkhus towards the progress of culture, literature, arts, and crafts assumed even greater dimensions. By about the 4th and 5th centuries, it seemed that no sculptor could compete with the Sinhala Buddhist monk in the art of making the Buddha statue. About the year 456 AC, a bhikkhu by the name of Nanda, with 4 other monks, visited China as a cultural ambassador of Ceylon. Nandathera, who was a celebrated sculptor, presented the Chinese emperor with a Buddha statue which he sculpted, an extremely exquisite and wonderful piece of craftsmanship. From a distance of about 10 paces, the statue appeared truly brilliant, but as one came closer to the image, the features gradually disappeared. Kings and dignitaries of Central Asia sent able sculptors to procure copies of the statue, but none could execute anything similar to the Buddha image of Nanda. It is well known that even during the Kandyan period, the last and decadent period of the Sinhala kingdom, bhikkhus painted viharas. The Jataka stories and other paintings in Degaldoruva and Riddhi Vihara were done by the famous artist monk of the time, Devaragampala Silvatana Onanse, who lived in the second half of the 18th century. These paintings, highly esteemed and appreciated by art critics, were executed under the supervision of the Venerable Muratota Mahanayaka Thera of the Malvata Monastery in Kandy. It should also be mentioned here that the Venerable Ratmalane Sri Dharmaloka Mahathera, 1828 to 1887 AC, the founder of the Vidyalalankara Pirivena at Paliyagoda, when he was residing in the region of Satkorale, renovated several dilapidated viharas and himself executed the paintings there. Footnote. Today, the Venerable Mabalagama Vipulasara is well known as a distinguished sculpture artist. He is the president of the National Art Society of Ceylon. End footnote. The arts and literature began their development from the 5th century AC. At the beginning of this century, the Venerable Buddhaghosa Thera translated the Sinhala commentaries into Pali. What should merit special mention about the 5th century in relation to the change and development of Bhikkhu life is the writing of the Mahavamsa, the history of the Sinhalese, by the Venerable Mahanama Thera. According to many suttas in the Tipitaka, the Buddha had stated that it was improper for and unworthy of a bhikkhu to be engaged in commonplace talk about such subjects as kings, ministers, bandits, wars, cities, and provinces. But from cover to cover, the Mahavamsa contains stories about kings, ministers, bandits, wars, and rebellions, towns, cities, and countries. Mahanama Thera was more than aware of this injunction. However, the time required a systematically written history of the Sinhala nation, and he decided to write it. Undoubtedly, it was contrary to the teachings found in the suttas. However, he discovered a device to exonerate himself from the blame for breaking the rule. The commentaries maintain that, at the end of a discussion about kings and ministers and others, if one reflects that, quote, even such powerful personages were subject to decay and death, that talk or discussion itself becomes a topic of meditation, kamatana. So Mahanama Thera terminated every chapter of the Mahavamsa with a gatha, verse, containing the idea of the impermanence of life or some other spiritual and religious admonition. And further, each chapter ends with a formula which says that, quote, the Mahavamsa was written for the serene joy and emotion of the pious, end quote. This is how the learned Thera avoided the blame of writing history books containing talk of, quote, commonplace things. A picture. The Ruanvali Saya at Anuradhapura after restoration. The most venerated Dagaba, Stupa, in Ceylon, built in the 1st century BC by King Dutugamuni. End caption. An assembly of bhikkhus convened by the exant Bhiksu Peramuna on June 29, 1946, at Colombo Town Hall to discuss their role in national affairs. A picture. Another picture. A bhikkhu, the author, addressing a mass meeting on the Gale Face Green in Colombo. Another picture. The Venerable Mapalagama Vipussulata Thera, incumbent of the temple, standing left, the author seated center, and their colleagues examine palm leaf manuscripts of the Pali Tipitaka in the library of the Parama Dhamma Chettiya Pirivena at Ramalana. Another picture. A class of children learning Buddhism under the historic Bo tree at Raja Mahavihara Pagoda, the author's monastery. The Dagaba is beside the Bo tree. Picture. Vidyodaya University, the main entrance showing a portion of the library and administration building. On the campus of Vidyalankara University, the Venerable Natandiye Panyakara Thera is seen in front of the library. Another picture. Minister of State and Mrs. J.R. Jayawardena are seated behind the bhikkhus at the Independence Day celebrations in Kandy in 1969. In the front row is the author talking with the Mahayana Yaka Thera of the Ramanya sect. Another picture. At the Buddhist Christian memorial service for the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, organized by the author, who at that time was Vice-Chancellor of the Vidyodaya University of Ceylon, and the Reverend Dr. Edmund F. Perry, at the time visiting professor of comparative study of religions at Vidyodaya University, held at Vijayarama Buddhist Temple, Gangodavila, near the university. From left to right, the Venerable Dampe Ratanasara Nayakathera, incumbent of the temple, the author, and Dr. Perry are seen leading the university and community congregation in the ceremony of, quote, transferring merits to Dr. King. The author of the Dipavamsa, too, after enumerating the names from King Mahasasamata down to Prince Siddhartha, the Buddha's first name, suddenly inserts the verse beginning with Anicca Vata Samkara, signifying the impermanence of all conditioned things, as if he had recited the whole list of names of the Mahasamata dynasty in order to prove the impermanence of things. This, too, was in conformity with the idea expressed in the commentaries. Wilhelm Geiger, who edited and translated the Mahavamsa, says that there is hardly a corner of the Indian continent whose history is chronicled as well as Ceylon's. Had Mahanamathera not written the Mahavamsa, the Sinhala people would have been deprived of the proud privilege of possessing an unbroken and complete history. Footnote. The Mahavamsa, the Great Chronicle of Ceylon, is written in elegant Pali verse, and has been continued up to the present century at different periods by different monks. End footnote. The writing of the Mahavamsa was a definite sign of the greater participation of bhikkhus in national activities. From this time onwards, they began to engage in public affairs. It is not proposed to describe here the great contributions made by Buddhist monks to the development of Sinhala civilization, culture, and literature during the Polonnaruwa, Dambayadaniya, and Kotte periods, since these are already well known to students of Ceylonese history. Suffice it to say that if we have any literature of which we can be proud of, virtually all of it was written by bhikkhus. A contemporary Sinhala novelist went so far as to praise the bhikkhus for having saved Sinhala civilization and culture from the sex maniacs. End of section.